Hello everybody, and welcome to this video, which is going to be sort of a continuation of our discussion of lists in action, and we're going to look at some more advanced blocks that are available to us when we are working with lists. So to start, I'm going to look in the variables palette, and I have previously imported tools, and it means that these blocks down here are available to us. We've already looked at this block for each item of list, and so this provides a way of processing each element of a list one at a time, going through each element of a list. So as a very simple example, let's suppose that I had a couple of provinces: British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Then I could simply, let's use looks, say item for 2 seconds, or, and so, well, let me just do it for a shorter period of time. Let's say half a second. So British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. My poor sprite has wandered over here. And you may recall my saying previously that if I leave an input field blank, it automatically looks for the variable and uses that variable. So consequently, this will achieve the same result. Now, in addition to this block, we have one called empty, which is pretty straightforward. It is a predicate. Remember, it's that hexagonal shape, and it reports true or false. It'll be true if the list is empty, false otherwise. And of course, this one's empty. If I wanted to create an empty list, now this is sort of curious. This list isn't empty. To create a totally empty list, remember we said we can add elements by clicking on the right triangle. We can go all the way down to a completely empty list. This one is in fact true. So this predicate might come in handy at some point. The next that we want to look at is called the map block. And what this does is it takes a list and it takes some sort of an operation. It applies that operation to all the elements of this list and reports it as a new list. So, for example, let me take my list of provinces here. I'll just drag that in here. And let's suppose I want the first letter. Well, if I want the first letter, I'm going to go into operators, and I want letter 1 of, and I'm going to get rid of the word world. And so it's going to take letter 1 of British Columbia, then Alberta, then Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and report it as a list. So BASM. So that is what map does. It applies an operation to all the elements of a list and produces a new list. So that list should be about the same length as the original list that you're working with. So you can do this with words. You can also do this with numbers. So let's take another example with numbers. Let's suppose that I'm going to take a list with 4 values. I'll say 10, 30, 20, and 40. And what do I want to do? I want to go ahead and square each one. So 10 squared is 100, 30 squared is 900, 20 squared is 400, and 40 squared is 1600. How would I square them? I need some sort of an operation that takes each number times itself. And now in this case, I only had one blank input, but if I choose an operation with 2 blank inputs, then it's going to generate a new list. And first it's going to take 10 times 10, then 30 times 30, then 20 times 20, and 40 times 40. So again, it applies this operation to all the elements of the list to make a new list. Let's just see what it looks like. There it is. We have just gone ahead and squared all those numbers. So that shows you how map works. Finally, we can go to our, or almost finally, we can look at a block called keep items such that. So map gives us a way of transforming all the elements of a list. But what if we only want a subset? Well, we can take a list. Let me go ahead and duplicate this here. I'll take my provinces. I'm going to add a province or two. So let's add Ontario and Quebec. It seems just rude to ignore the most populous provinces. And I am only going to pick those provinces that are longer than 7 letters. I better make sure that there are some that are shorter. Let's make it 10. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into operators, and I want to look at those words that have a length greater than 10. All right, so I have length of, this will tell me the length of a word. So for example, world has 5 characters. And if I leave this completely empty, let's see if it's happy about this. Yeah, nothing at all has a length of 0. I'm going to drag this in here. And so I'm going to look to see where the length of a word is greater than 10. So I'll put this now in here. And so keep items means it's going to produce a list such that the length of the word is greater than 10. And again, it will examine, the input here is blank. That means it's going to be substituted first by British Columbia. I'm sure that's greater than 10. Then Alberta, which probably isn't. Saskatchewan. How long is Manitoba? 4, looks like 8. So let's just go ahead and let Snap do the heavy lifting here. And apparently there are exactly 2 provinces with a length greater than 10. So that's how keep items works. It applies some sort of a test, and so you know the fact that this is hexagonal in shape. You notice that there's that hexagon there. That implies that we're going to be putting something in here that will return true or false, a predicate block. Some of these operators are actually pretty sophisticated. For example, you'll notice there's a hexagonal block here that's got the word and. And like the name suggests, this is going to be true if the thing on the left is true and the thing on the right is true. So suppose I wanted to find provinces that had a length between, let's say, 5 and 8. Well, what I could do is I could look for those that have a length greater than 5, and I'm going to go ahead and choose my less than, and again length of, and this is going to look scary, but don't worry, once we have it sorted out it'll make sense. Okay, so you can sort of read this. It says the length of something is going to be greater than 5 and the length of that same thing is going to be less than 10. So if I put this in here now, I'm getting to get a pretty sophisticated bit of a pretty sophisticated block here. And so there are apparently 3 provinces that have a length between 5 and 10. And I'm pretty sure that that is correct. Our last block is one that we did not mention in the document that accompanies this workshop. And again, we find it in variables, and it is called the combine. And what the combine with, and you specify an operator here, you take items of a list and you join them basically 2 at a time. So you're sort of applying an operation like, for example, addition or multiplication, and you're going to take the first times the second times the third and so forth. Easiest way to explain this is with an example. So let me go ahead and duplicate this. And I'm just going to make things perfectly clear, I'm just going to make these a little smaller, and I'll just add one more. Okay, so we actually have the numbers 1 through 5. Now right now, of course, I get an error because I didn't have anything in here. So let me go into my operators, and I will pick addition. Okay, so it's going to combine these with addition, and I get the number 15. And if you add up 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, you will discover, let's check that, 3 and 1 is 4, 6, 10, 15. Yes, you do in fact get the number 15. And so that is a way of taking a group of numbers and combining them into one. So if I wanted to calculate the average, we could probably take this block along with the division block, and we could get something pretty interesting happening here. So let's go ahead and do that. In fact, why don't we go ahead and make a block? Because average is the sort of thing that you might want to do over and over again. You can never tell when you might need to know the average of student scores or your average miles per gallon over several trips. Who knows? Average is just a good, useful thing to be able to calculate. So we're going to go to make a block. And for a change, instead of making this a command, I'm going to make this a reporter, because an average is a calculation. And so rather than just display it, you want to be able to possibly use it in some other context. So we're going to make it a reporter, and we'll call it average. And you note that it comes with a block called report. And whatever number shows up here is going to be reported back so you can use it. So let me just to demonstrate this, I'm going to write 0.0. And now I have the world's most useless block, because if I click it, it tells me the average is 0.0. But the average of what? I haven't specified that. So let me edit this. And as you might suspect, I'm going to add an input field. I have to say what I'm going to be calculating the average of. I'm going to be calculating the average of some numbers. I'll just call this numbers, because that sounds like a good name. And I'm going to insist that it be a list. Now, I can take this and drag it in here. Well, let me just keep it in here for a moment and make this a little bit larger. So the list in question is no longer 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, obviously. It's going to be numbers. Whatever I pass in there, that's going to be what I calculate first the sum of, and then I need to take that sum and remember to calculate the average. You add up all the numbers and you divide by the number of numbers. So how many numbers are in this list? Well, fortunately, I have a block that will tell me that, the length of. So I can take this, which represents the sum, put it here, divide it by the length of my list, and I have to say here the length of numbers. And this I can then report. And there we have it. I have a block that will report the average of a bunch of numbers. Let's see it in action. Another custom block with this name exists. Would you like to replace it? Indeed, I would. All right, so now I've got average, and what is the average of 10, 30, 20, 40? Why, it's 25. All right, so this pretty much wraps it up for this video. We have seen how we can map an operation to all the elements of a list to make a new list, how we can create a subset of a list with keep items, and finally how we can combine things together to produce a single value out of a list. And we even managed as a bonus to get an average, which could be a useful block in a number of contexts. Now, since I like this block so much and I want to use it elsewhere, I would probably choose, when I'm finished with all this, export blocks. And then I could decide on the blocks that I wish to export. These are the ones when I chose import tools. These showed up. Since they're already available to me, I don't really need to export them. The only one I really need to export is average, which you can see has been checked here. And so when I click on OK, it will produce an XML file, which I could then save. And I'm just going to call this average.xml. And now if I go into a new project, and I will say yes here, I could then go ahead and import that block. And so there it is right there. So I now have the ability to take a block or even a series of blocks and bring them from one project to another. All right, enough for this video. I hope you found it useful, and as always, feedback is appreciated.